All right, so maybe since we have most participants in the room, I think we shall begin the concurrent session, yeah? So is that all right, everyone? Okay. Good day, good evening, good afternoon to everyone in the room, wherever you are. Welcome to the concurrent session 2 with the theme Environment Changes and Threats. Yeah. So in this session, we will be having 8 papers, 8 paper presentation. The second presenter is unable to join us today due to unforeseen circumstances. Although we may be slightly delayed in if we refer to the schedule, but actually we're just okay. So with just a gentle reminder, yeah, to all presenters, the presentation is 15 minutes, yeah, followed by 5 minutes question and answer. So whoever would like to ask question, you may unmute to ask questions or just type your question in the chat box, yeah. So we will assist you in the question and answer session. So without further delay, may I invite the first speaker to actually share with us her presentation, Petra Sumasgartner, on the Global Anthropause Raptor Research Network, how raptor research during the COVID-19 pandemic provides invaluable opportunities for conservation biology. Petra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to share my screen here, so hopefully that you can all see my presentation, but it seems I'm on the wrong screen. Sorry. Already the first technical issues. I'll have it in a second. Share screen. Okay. All right.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Thank you so much for the kind invitation and for the introduction, Evelyn. It's a great pleasure to be here today with this Asian Raptor Research Network. I have never been attending before, and it is really wonderful, actually, because usually, obviously, with the traveling, it's not so easy to go so far. But there is a big advantage of these online meetings, although we all hope that we will be in presence soon again. But this way I can join, and it's really, really fantastic, because I always wanted to connect a bit more with the Asian Raptor research world. I have been working myself in Mongolia once, which was a really amazing time. So my heart is there, definitely. And it's lovely to introduce today a new global network that we have been launching earlier last year, where we hope to also gain collaborators in the Asian raptor world. So a perfect audience for our endeavor. Myself, I'm Petra Sumasgartner. I'm a postdoc at the University of Vienna, specifically based at the Konrad Lorenz Research Center. And I have been working on raptors, specifically urban raptors, myself for the last 15 years now. And as I said, today I would like to give you an overview on a new network that we founded with my co-authors, the Global Anthropause Raptor Research Network, or short GAN, where we want to take advantage of this devastating time that we are going through with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns that are associated with it. Because of this pandemic, we have the chance to use data that were previously just not available, because it is basically a large-scale global experiment, so to say. And there we see a big advantage to actually inform conservation efforts on raptors. And I think raptor conservation is at heart of all of our audience. So that's where we came in and where we founded this network. And as I said, now we are trying to find more collaborators to really do global scale analysis. And through this talk now, I want to guide you through what kind of data sets we are looking for, what kind of questions we would like to tackle, and hope that you have an interest in joining us. So the Anthropocene, you all know, we are living through this time, and it is characterized by human footprint. What I mean by that is human infrastructure, like you can see here, with just building sealed surface areas, all the infrastructure, traffic infrastructure that we humans have created is part of that. And on the other hand, typical for the Anthropocene is, of course, human activity, the mobility, the traffic that we have in a dynamic system throughout the globe. And usually these two are completely disentangled. You can't tear them apart easily, only with big experimental approaches, which is also a reason why it is so hard to say which one is the main influencing factor. Is it the infrastructure? Is it the human activity? And that's where we see this global pandemic being an opportunity to disentangle these two influencing factors. What we are talking about when we speak about the Anthropocene and this human footprint and human activity are, of course, the environmental factors that we humans have changed ever since we are changing the planet. So we are influencing habitat composition, we are influencing resource availability, we are a very big disturbance factor. We have our role also in disease interactions, in predation interactions, or we are a big competitor ourselves, and we are a big influence in terms of persecution. We all know that specifically with raptors, persecution is a huge topic, and that is something that we humans have brought on this planet. And in the long run, when we talk about conservation efforts, what we mean is, of course, the demographic outcomes. We want to understand how we influence productivity, survival, recruitment, immigration, emigration, so the entire demography of raptors. And only if we do that, then we can make very effective conservation measures. And what is influencing these demographic outcomes is, of course, behavior and physiology. These are the two mechanisms behind. And that's what I will be talking around today as well, because I want to give you examples of data sets that can be relevant to really tackle these questions, to understand the mechanisms. So how behavior and physiology is mediating the demographic outcomes. And only if we understand this link, then we can go into conservation efforts, then we can design measurements to really conserve our beautiful raptor world. And as I said in the introduction, the big thing that came through the pandemic are environmental perturbations like this COVID-19 related lockdowns, or what we refer to in research the Anthropause now, because these COVID-19 related lockdowns were influencing human activity while they were not influencing the human footprint. So all the infrastructure on the planet is, of course, a fixed thing. We can't change that. That is just there. But human activity has been changing tremendously through these lockdown regimes. And that's where we can, for the first time, disentangle these two. And that's what we would like to do, because we think once we understand the influence of each of them, then we can really understand the mechanisms that are driving our raptor populations. So what is the Anthropause? We are living through it, so I don't need to explain much, but what is mainly meant by it is a shift in recreational activity. There are high activity areas, and then there are low activity areas. And depending on where we are in these lockdown regimes, it is differently pronounced at different places of the world. We have now also a very good understanding how human activity have changed. So that is linked to the so-called stringency index that the University of Oxford has been publishing, and that's the metric we use. It's a global one where we really can measure human activity in a smaller scale, but across the globe, what is going on in terms of our activity throughout the last 2 years, basically. And we have been teaming up within GAN, within our network, with two very important initiatives. One is the Biologging Society and the COVID-19 Biologging Initiative. You might have heard of it. It was a big paper that came out in Nature, Ecology and Evolution in 2020, led by Christian Rutz and many co-authors. And he is also a collaborator, a co-founder of GAN. So we are working very closely together because there is a big common theme, which is raptors. So there is a specific raptor sub-project within this Biologging Initiative. They have already data sets from across the globe, but there are obviously gaps as always in our research. At the moment, they have 98 individual tracking data sets of 45 different species. They have taken together raptors and also ravens because and corvids are very relevant also when you talk about the scavenger predator community. And it is covering at the moment North and South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. So they are already having a really big bulk of data, which is movement data, of course. And they are still welcoming more collaborators, but I also want to put the word out here today. So if you have tracking data sets, please don't be shy to get in touch. It's a really fantastic initiative. Importantly, you stay data owner. So that part doesn't change. You're just becoming a collaborator, and your data might be used in this big global analysis. I also put here the email address so that you can get directly in touch with them. Obviously, I'm more than happy to assist here as well, should you be interested in joining here some data sets. The other initiative that we are linked to is from the Peregrine Fund, the Global Raptor Impact Network GRIN. You most likely know Chris McClure. He's also giving a plenary talk tomorrow, and he's a key collaborator here also in our initiative. I also warmly invite you to the plenary. He will be also speaking about our collaboration a little bit in there. And importantly, if you join us, you basically join all of these three initiatives with all the potential they have to offer. And I will talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides so that you know what you would get yourself into. And I think it's a great win-win situation for everybody. So we are after biologging data is a very obvious one. I mentioned the biologging initiative already. Biologging data is typical for raptor researchers as well, because they are fairly big birds, and we can attach GPS loggers on them, and they are tracking records pretty much all over the globe already from these wonderful birds, and we can learn so much from it. And joining a big global analysis doesn't take away any options with your data sets on site, with smaller scale analysis. As I said, you stay data owner. It really is about contributing to this global endeavor that we are hoping to achieve here. So biologging data might be movement data, classic GPS, might also be accelerometer data. They become more and more important in recent years, where we can understand dial activity patterns, which is something that might have changed throughout the pandemic with these lockdown regimes, with changes in human activity. So these are the main metric that we are using as response variables to understand how we might have influenced raptor movement and activity. Then this displacement responses is obviously a key aim of the whole initiative, that we want to understand how we have been influencing those as human beings. And we might expect strongest responses where the human footprint is the highest, which is, for example, urban areas in comparison to more natural areas. Here on that slide, I have also put my own study species out. So these are the 4 species that I mainly work with, where I also are able to contribute data sets to these endeavors. And then the other thing that might be very relevant of data sets to have are individually marked populations. Especially if you have individual colorings on birds and you can really follow individual life histories. These are data sets that are incredibly relevant if we want to go into a global analysis. So should you be hosting some of these data sets, that's definitely something we would be very interested in using for this analysis. But it might be not just individually coloring and individual people or raptor researchers gaining this data. These days, it's very important to also put out the word to citizen scientists. There are many, many community science projects that are doing observations that are incredibly relevant. And importantly, citizen science has increased throughout the pandemic. People were just trying to connect more with the natural world, and they're contributing more to this data. There is plenty of literature out there now, also showing us that eBird records has increased, for example. And also in my own project, the Viennese Kestrel project, I have more reports from citizen scientists just because they were stuck at home and they were seeing things they haven't seen before, or there was a change in behavior and they could actually record that for us, and which is a fantastic opportunity. So also, please keep that in mind. There are so many citizen science projects. Should you be involved in one of them that have been recording data over the pandemic, before, after, and during, then it would be fantastic if you could get in touch and maybe contribute these data sets to our endeavors. What we hope to answer with this kind of data is changing in breeding phenology. Maybe the timing of breeding have changed because of changes in human activity. We can also use for raptors here specifically the ages first breeding. Maybe that has changed. There could be a thing that because there is more space in the landscape, if humans are confined to their homes, that raptors that are very young might have had an opportunity to breed that they usually don't have. And the nice thing about raptors, I don't need to tell you that you're all experts in your own fields, is that you can age a raptor without having them coloring. You know if it is a young breeder or if it is an adult bird. So should you have information on that, very relevant, could be incredibly interesting for an analysis about breeding phenology and breeding age, for example. Then there are data out there from camera traps at feeding sites, for example. Also, that could be very relevant to understand these responses from raptor behavior. Camera trap data are remote. You don't need to necessarily be on site all the time. And there is so much information you can get here, for example, just about the species setup showing up at supplementary feeding sites, or the cycle when these species are coming in. Again, the DNA activity of these species. So these are things that we would like to look into. Nest cameras are also very relevant for that. Again, a method to record remotely doesn't necessarily need a person in the field recording this data. We have here, for example, also data sets from the crowned eagle, so from the Black Sparrowhawk project, where we have done a lot with camera trapping, and I know many other people are using camera traps for raptor research. Also, pellets and prey remains might be very useful because that would reflect changes in diet. And it doesn't necessarily need to be collected directly during the hardcore lockdowns, but it is something that one can infer from prey remains that are collected over a season, for example, or these days also very useful tissue samples for isotopic analysis. Tissues can also be feathers, for example, where you know then what the bird has been eating while the feather was growing, or blood samples. So all of these don't necessarily are linked to really being in the field during lockdown. We are completely aware that many of our fieldwork were stopped during the pandemic, but these are data that could even be gathered after, for example. We expect the strongest responses in those that are relying on scavenging, because the reliance of scavenging might be heavily influenced by us humans, simply because we are putting out supplementary food with vulture restaurants. We are responsible for a lot of roadkill, which is an important food resource for many, but also a cause of mortality for many. So that might be a species setup that could be very promising for the analysis that we are envisioning. And we might see prey switching behavior, just because if activity changes, if disturbance changes, the prey spectrum might change as well. And we might be able to detect this with this kind of data sets that I have been outlining here a bit. Morphometric measurements is another one that could be very relevant. So looking into how the animals are developing, especially on the nest, for example, with nestlings, we might see differences in growth curve depending on how much they were disturbed by humans through recreational activity. We might see differences in body condition of the chicks. We might also use biomarkers. Again, blood samples are very relevant for that because pollution levels might have changed with changes in traffic regimes. And these blood samples, biomarkers, can be used for all kinds of different individual health measurements. So to give you some idea, we can measure oxidative stress, immunoassays, hormones, antioxidants. We can measure parasites as well. All of these things might have an influence, and depending on how humans were interacting with the natural world. And to wrap this up a bit, so we are interested in understanding the mechanism, behavior, and physiology to understand how this is influencing demographic outputs. And demographic outcomes is something we measure a lot, of course, in raptor research. So data on productivity, data on survival and mortality are relevant for us. We know already that the COVID-19 related lockdowns have been changing hunting, trade, and persecution, including raptors. So we usually see globally an increase in these things. But again, there are smaller scale differences that are really interesting to disentangle. And with global data sets, we might have the chance to do just that and to go beyond study systems on site to really understand global patterns. And that's what really is our aim here. Reduced traffic volume is one of the key things that have changed. With that, reduced roadkill is something that we would expect. So that is an example where we would expect strong responses. We might see the strongest responses where the human footprint is the highest, as I said before, for example, in urban areas. So urban data sets could be very relevant here. And we might expect the strongest responses within the scavenger community, as I already said as well. But definitively any raptor data set from before, during, after could be of high relevance here. And we hope we gain a lot of collaborators. The wrap is really up in my last slide here. So I mentioned all these initiatives that are existing now. Here is the one I introduced you today, GAN, the Global Anthropause Raptor Research Network. But I said that we are linked to the Biologging Society, specifically the Raptor sub-project of the Biologging Initiative, and we are linked to GRIN, the Global Raptor Impact Network. So we are closely working together. And if you are keen to work with us, your data could be used for all three of them. And I wanted just to summarize here on where we overlap and where we are different, so you understand it also a bit better. So this summary slide is quite relevant here. You know, GRIN, the Global Raptor Impact Network, is interested in any kind of raptor data, and they are doing amazing jobs in analyzing these data sets quite on a global big scale as well. Obviously, if they have movement tracks, movement data, these can be used for the Raptor movement sub-project of the Biologging Initiative, and all the other data that they are hosting that are in the time frame that is of interest for GAN can go then directly from GRIN into GAN. Importantly also is how long these projects are running. I mean, peregrine funds. GRIN is a long-term project. GAN, the Global Anthropause Raptor Research Network, is also a long-term project. We use the Anthropause now, but we want to really work larger into the Anthropocene and understand our role as humans for raptor conservation. The Biologging Society, specifically the Raptor sub-project, is more a short-term one. We really want to understand now the movement differences from the lockdowns. So there is a really pressing urge to submit data now if you are interested. We use MoveBank specifically for these data sets and the GRIN network for data sets that are going beyond tracks. And very importantly, know your data stay with you, you are data owner. You would just become a collaborator, meaning co-authorship would be granted should your data be used to a certain extent in the analysis, but that is something that would be discussed in detail once the project is forming in full detail. So I really hope I sparked your interest here, and we already have a lot of collaborators. We hope to get many more, and we specifically hope to get collaborators in areas that are often seen as understudied, like Southern America, Africa, Asia as well, and Australasia. Lots is happening in Europe and North America, and we are aware so many interesting data are existing everywhere else. And that's also a reason why I'm here today, because I really want to have a warm welcome here to everybody in the Raptor world. Maybe you are interested to work with us for a bigger goal, which is raptor conservation. And with this, I thank you so much. Here's any information on our paper with all the stuff that I have been outlining here in more detail, and also our project email address should you be interested to get in touch. Thank you so much for the invitation today, and I hope you enjoyed. And please, any questions, I'm ready here now.
Thank you, Dr. Petra, for the interesting sharing session. We would like to open for question and answer. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat box or unmute yourself, yeah?
Seems it was all super clear.
Yeah, probably could you share with us, Petra, how big is the network at the moment? Yeah, how big is the network? Yeah, at the moment.
At the moment, we are really at the beginning. So everything that is contributed to the biologging work is also used for our collaboration. So we have already this 95 tracking data of 45 species. So there is a big collaborative network out there that will be approached for GAN as well. But specifically now data sets that are going beyond tracking, that's now a new call. And I have been showing this slide. So these are our current ones. where, I mean, it's mainly the institutes that have been involved with the paper already, but this is now really the call to arms, so that we are getting larger. But we have quite a few institutes that are working with us already, but we really want to have a welcome to everybody, and it doesn't have to be a big initiative. It really, any smaller raptor study is of relevance. So don't ever think that if you're working on one species and just a couple of years, it's not enough. It is enough. It just needs to be pulled together for a larger goal, basically.
Yeah, thank you, Petra. There is a request from Dr. Pankaj requesting, can you please share your insights on data related to impact of power lines and raptors?
So the power line question, or in general, energy infrastructure question, is of course a very big one. And a lot of people are working on that. Some that are here on that slide as well. So the Eurokite project has specifically that goal. The Vulture Conservation Foundation is doing a lot in that regard as well. So this is a very, very big question. And to be honest, we are not tackling that one specifically now, because it is already, there is a lot going on and we don't want to overlap. We want to do something new. And the power line is something that is not influenced by human activity specifically. It's a human infrastructure. So it is the human footprint side. And we are now interested in the human activity side, which is two different things. And the pandemic has allowed us to disentangle those. Having said that, once we have an overview on all the data that are submitted to us, there might be chances to look into this power line question in more detail, just because so many Raptor projects are specifically focusing on that. And even if we don't do the analysis, we will get an idea about what is out there, and then there can be sub-project formed, of course, because one thing is also to network. The whole idea is to network, to also get the Raptor community together so people know who is working on what. And that's already such a big step, to do collaborations, to understand who is actually working in the same field or in a similar field and is keen to share data, for example.
Thank you. All right. It looks like that is the last question for your session, Petra. Thank you very much once again, Petra, from the University of Vienna, Austria. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So for the next presenter,
hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Hi.
Yes, yeah. Please allow me to introduce you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And welcome, Sushi. Yeah, from Guangxi Biodiversity Research and Conservation Association, Nanning, China, as well as School of Biological Sciences, the University of Queensland, as well as from the Centre of Ecology and Conservation, University of Exeter, UK. With the title Raptor Migration at Guantouling, Southwest China, Phenology, Weather, Influence, and Persecution Pressure. With that, Suchi, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, for the introduction. And I'm going to share my screen now. And okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Xu and I'm from China. Currently, I'm a PhD student in the University of Queensland. So today I'm going to talk about the raptor migration at Guantouling, which is a site in southwest China. In specific, I'm going to introduce the phenology and weather influence and the persecution pressure at this place. So if we look at the big picture, the raptor migration in East Asia is like there are two main flyways. First is a continental flyway, and there's the other one, the oceanic flyway that passes through the islands. Also, if we look at the past and the present contributions to the ARRCN, we would see that there's a lot of contributions from Korea, from Japan, also from Southeast Asia. But there's not much information from mainland China, such as where does migration occur in China, what's the magnitude and the conservation status, especially considering the size and the geographical location of China, such information is seriously lacking. And as well as for the conservation of raptors, hunting is illegal in China, but it persists in certain places, and it needs evaluation to know how severe is the situation and what kind of conservation measure needs to be taken. So this is our study site is in the southwest part of China. If you can see, it's on this inside this little red box on the coast of southern China. Back in 2015, we started this one of the first standard raptor migration monitoring project in mainland China, and it lasts until today. And but in this research, we only use data from 2015 to 2019 and autumn migration only. So we did migration monitoring for about 1.5 months, from late September to early November. We recorded both the raptor migrating and the gunshots we heard at this place, as well as the weather data such as rainfall, temperature, cover, wind information for a regression model. Actually, the reason we choose to do monitoring at this place is because it's like a locally well-known site for hunting raptors, for shooting the raptors. So we decided to do the raptor counting here. For one thing is to record the migration of raptors, and the other is to try to combat illegal hunting. Yeah. So just for some context, this is the guns and bullets confiscated by the police at this site. And as well, you can also see a victim honey buzzard. On the right, if you can read Chinese, this sign means the surveillance point for the protection of birds. And you can see all the bullet holes is from angry hunters. Apparently, they don't really agree with this sign. So that's the situation here. There's some illegal hunting going on, and we'd like to know how severe it is and what kind of impact it has on the raptors. So what we found is during the 5 autumn migration seasons, we reported more than 40,000 raptors belonging to 30 diurnal raptor species. Griffith buzzard and orange honey buzzard and Amur falcon were the most numerous 3 species. We have orange honey buzzards mainly in the late part of the season, and although there's no data, but most of them are juveniles. As you can see on the right, in the bar charts that we have for the migration season from October to November, and the line segments above the bar charts are the dates of the 5, 50, and 95% passage. So, and you can see that for Amur falcon, there's a huge variation. There's not a clear phenology, and the number of Amur falcon varies a lot at our site. The next numerous species is, it's not a species, but a genus of raptors. It's accipiters, because we have 7 species of accipiters in this site, and if you're familiar with these Asian raptors, you know how difficult it is to tell them apart in the field. So we decided to put them together in analysis, but they mostly belong into the Chinese sparrowhawk, Japanese sparrowhawk, and a lot of seagrass too. For the next 6 most numerous raptors, we have like the black buzzard, Jordan's buzzard, and black kite that concentrates mostly in the second half of the season. And we have Eurasian hobby, crested serpent eagle, mainly in the first half of the season. Interestingly, we do record like a good amount of Jordan's buzzard, which was previously unknown in this part of China. And there's, in the recent years, we also found that there's a rather northern population that goes all the way up to the Yangtze River regions in central China that was previously unknown, because if you look at the distribution maps, in the field guides and on the websites. This is basically unknown population, and they show up regularly in the second half of the season, and we suspect maybe it's this northern population migrating south. And I also want to talk about the Brahmini's kite. The data is not shown here, but if you go to the BirdLife datasheet distribution map and some literature such as Birds of East Asia, you will see that it was once like a summer migrant to southern China, but for the last decade there are only around 10 records from all of mainland China for this species. So, and most of them are coming from our monitoring side. It's very possible that this population of Brahmini's kite, that whether it's summers or migrate past in China, it's pretty much locally extinct in China. And yeah, that's so much for the phenology. We also did statistical analysis with weather influence. How does weather influence raptor migration? We know that precipitation winds influence like pattern migration, and raptors are also no exception neither. And on the plot on the right, we have the model estimates on the x-axis and the weather predictors on the y-axis. We did the analysis for the four main species, and as well as like a group for all the other raptors species. So there are some interesting patterns that we found. We found more tiny buzzards under northerly and northeasterly winds, and we also found that high cloud cover correlates with more raptors recorded for the three main species. As for the Griffiths buzzards, there's studies from Japan that when they do the sea crossing on the oceanic flyway, they follow like good tailwinds, well, in a significant manner. But in our study, we found a positive relationship, but it's not significant for Griffiths buzzards. And also, where apparently the precipitation halts migration, which is no surprise. That's when it's raining, there's hardly anything migrating. So yeah, and that's for the weather influence on raptor migration. So for the hourly pattern, we have raptors migrating throughout the day, but most numerous in the morning and in the afternoon. For Griffiths buzzards, they mainly migrate in the morning, as well as for the accipiter hawks, they mainly migrate in the morning too. On the contrary, like Amur falcon mainly migrates in the afternoon, especially in like very late in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, when they sometimes form really large flocks, hundreds of birds in our site. And there's also some interesting pattern for the gunshots for their hourly pattern. You can see that it's a red line representing the number of gunshots per hour. We have a very small peak at 9 o'clock, and most of the gunshots were recorded like past noon, and especially in the afternoon. So yeah, that's where we recorded most of the gunshots. So what we did is we correlate the number of gunshots with the number of birds migrating, and we found some species specific patterns. So for the most numerous species, only oriental honey buzzard has a significant relationship with the gunshots, which means when there are more honey buzzards, there's likely more gunshots recorded. And it's also true for other species and total number of species, but for like Griffith's buzzards and Amur falcon and the spiters, there's no such relationship. So yeah, that's the correlation we found for between hunting and the number of raptors migrating. So in our site, which is like I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if we go to the literature, we like in the tracking studies from Japan, we see that their honey buzzards use a very seasonally different migration route, and this explains why in our site there's mainly autumn migration but no spring migration, because you see that on the autumn they pass this southern coast of China, but on the spring, during spring they use a more inland route, and this is probably why there's no raptors hardly any raptors recorded during spring, because not only orange honey buzzards does this, probably Amur falcon and Griffith buzzards does this too. So yeah, this also explains why we have more honey buzzards under north and northeasterly winds, because that's where they come from. It forms good tailwinds for their migration. So in our study, we found that the main migration period for orange honey buzzards are like late October and early November, which is very interesting, because if we look at the data from Thailand, from central Thailand, which is even more south than our location, their honey buzzards arrive like in late September and much earlier than our side. It could be partly explained by the age difference in the honey buzzards in the two sides. So for our location, we have the majority is juvenile honey buzzards, and we suspect that although it took generally the same route with adults, but they depart later, they probably also took more detours along the coast, because they're not familiar with the route, while the adults are more experienced and they took more direct route. Therefore there are more juveniles honey buzzards ended up in our study site, but the adult birds rarely comes here. So this explains the late phenology of honey buzzards in our place. So eventually we also have suggestions for the law enforcement to how to tackle the illegal hunting in our study site. We suggest that they would be better concentrating their resources during the peak honey buzzard migration, especially on cloudy days with north and northeast wind, when the honey buzzards are likely to migrate, as well as during morning and late afternoon, where hunters may be targeting low flying birds, whether they are taking off or trying to find perching places when they fly very low. So yeah, the situation of hunting in our study site is unique, because most of the hunters, their livelihood does not depend on this. They hunt for fun, for some extra money, but no one's livelihood depends on it, and so it's a rather simple, like straightforward relationship between like raptor counters and hunters. We collaborate with the law enforcement trying to stop hunting as much as we can. So that's also the reason why we use this indirect method of trying to see which raptor is mostly hunted or probably selectively hunted by the hunters, because it's probably a bit difficult and dangerous to, for example, conduct service with the hunters, because it's a very intense relationship between the hunters and counters. So and for the magnitude of hunting, it's decreasing now every year, especially during this year and last year, because thanks to the more and more participation from the law enforcement, and the hunting of raptors in China is generally limited to very remote places, and it probably will not cause any negative impacts for any raptors at the population level, and this situation would probably be better in the future. So yeah, and yeah, just to give some more information on the patterns of raptor migration in mainland China. If you look at the map, there's no like large geographical barriers in the mainland China. There's no narrow crossing like in central Thailand, and so the raptor migration are rather scattered in all over the places. So now there are more and more people doing raptor counting in many parts of China. Most of the numbers are relatively low, like in terms of perhaps several thousands or a dozen thousands every season. So yeah, but luckily there are more and more people trying to study raptor migration in China now, and hopefully in the future we can have more data from mainland China, and just to fit in the bigger picture of raptor migration in East Asia. As for our site, we do have some future perspectives, some future things that we would like to work on. First is we want to move beyond simply species identification. So during our migration counting, we would like to collect information on the age and sex of selected raptors in the future, such as the pied harrier and marsh harriers, which we think there might be some age-related difference in their migration timing. We also want to move beyond recording local weather, but try to look at the large-scale weather system, what's their influence on migration, such as for the Amur falcon, because we found their numbers fluctuates like really high in different years. Some years we have 7,000 of them. Some years we only have like less than 1,000 of them. So we suspect that this might be due to the weather system in a much larger scale that drives them here or prevents them from coming here. So, and last but not least, I would like to give some special thanks to the BRC, which is a NGO that coordinates and is responsible for the counting. Without them, this study would not be possible. And many thanks to all the people, as well as the counters that contributed to our project. For more information, this research has been published at BirdLife and Bird Conservation International, and you can also contact me if you want more information. So yeah, that's my presentation, and hopefully I was not using too much time. And yeah, that's I think I'm ready to answer any questions if there's any. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sue, for insightful sharing with us. We open the floor for any question, yeah, to Sue.
Can I ask Susie a question?
Yes,
I'm Lim Kim Chai from Malaysian Nature Society in Malaysia.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Susie, for that presentation. It's great to know that there is a count site in mainland China, because all the past years, a lot of data have been coming from raptors that use the oceanic flyway. I would just like to know, can you tell us more about your count site? How is it like in terms of the geographical features, and what makes the raptors sort of concentrate at your count site? Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, very great question. I should have given more detail on that during my presentation. So for this site, it's on the tip of a peninsula, a small peninsula on the coast of China. I do think that raptors coming here are they are mostly on their way from China to Vietnam and to further down in Southeast Asia. But they do arrive inside this peninsula, not really for sea crossing, but most of them are having a detour here because we can see that once they enter our side, most of the raptors does not do sea crossing, but they follow the coastlines to back to the mainland and then go further west to Vietnam. So for why the raptors concentrate, I think mainly because of the geography that they follow the coastline into this peninsula, but they does not want to cross the sea, so they carry on following the coast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lim, as well as Sue. Any other questions from the floor? Probably we can take one more question before we proceed to the next speaker, yeah? Okay, if there is none from the floor, we thank you, Ms. Sue, for your sharing. Hold on. Okay, there's one from Wang Shan. Is there any other raptor counting sites in China?
Yeah, thanks, Wang Shan. And there are many, and we are going to hear another talk from Zule tomorrow. It's another site in China. So I do think there are like around probably more than 10 raptor counting sites in China, but most of them are organized by volunteers and not like counted in a coordinated and standardized fashion. So there are some sites in like North China, like in Beijing, in northern coast of China, and hopefully people will be able to collaborate more and share the data probably, so we can have a better picture of raptor migration in China. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Shu, for your sharing with all of us, on raptor migration in China.
Thank you.
So we proceed to the next speaker. She is Camille Concepcion, who is from the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, USA, also affiliated with the Division of Forestry and Natural Resource, West Virginia University, as well as the Mindanao State University. So the floor is yours, Camille.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if I do not mess up the sharing of the screen. All right, let me move around faces. Okay, so thank you and good afternoon. It's always really exciting to be sharing ideas with like-minded people. And as my very long title suggests, I'm going to be talking about impacts of landscape changes on birds of prey. Oops. All right. So we all know that anthropogenic landscape change is among the greatest threats to global biodiversity. Landscape change can lead to the loss of natural environments. It can alter ecosystem structure and function, and it can remove, reduce, or isolate suitable habitats. Although community and species responses to these changes is highly context-specific, human-modified environments almost always support smaller populations with lower species diversity than do unmodified environments. And forest raptors are especially vulnerable to these changes because they occur at smaller populations than most other avian species. They also occur at lower densities. They're dependent on the movement of their prey, and they're often the focus of persecution by humans. And all of this is heightened when we're talking about raptor communities that are found in tropical islands. So we know in tropical islands that endemism is high. We expect Therefore, that those species will be found in these limited ranges. And there's also this limited potential to disperse because not all of these species can fly over the ocean. And in fact, most of these endemics cannot do that. So the goal of my study is to understand the impacts of landscape changes to these tropical raptor communities and species, because really understanding this is essential to conserving wildlife populations. And the Philippines is a great place to look at these responses, not just because I'm biased, because I'm from here, but also because it's known to be among the most megadiverse countries in the world. And unfortunately, it's also extremely vulnerable to environmental changes. It's estimated that we only have 3% of our primary forests remaining, and the raptors of the Philippines are among the most threatened and the most poorly researched in the world. And so to study these birds, I conducted point counts following road transects. And excuse me, because I just really wanted to include the picture of myself on field, because I miss going on field. I haven't done so since the pandemic. So anyways, we had 5 study areas where we conducted these point counts. And these are all within the island of Mindanao. Let me grab the pointer. So this is Mindanao. It's the southernmost this large southernmost island in the Philippines. And the towns are Lantapan, ARRCN, Davao City, San Isidro, and Governor Generoso. Now, these places, they all have forests that are representative of the island, but most importantly, they're also accessible and they are safe to visit. Now, the forest could either be low elevation dipterocarp forest, which is your typical rainforest, or it can be high elevation montane, which is that rainforest covered in moss, as I like to describe it. And there can be different levels of disturbance. So some of these forests are near pristine, others are moderately disturbed, or they can also be severely disturbed. In these maps, the areas that are gray are areas that have at least 50% tree cover. So for each of our study area, we established a 10-kilometer route that would take us as close to the forest as possible. We conducted our point counts at every 1 kilometer mark. So that gives us 11 points for each of our transects. And we visited our transects 5 times over 3 days. We did that every year for 3 years between 2014 and 2016. And we conducted these surveys during November and December because this is when we suspect breeding season would begin. So it will be easier to spot the birds, especially the soaring birds. So one of our aims was to describe these raptor communities that are found within central and eastern Mindanao. And between 2014 and 2016, we recorded 13 species of birds of prey and over 1,600 raptor individuals. This includes 4 of the 5 endemics that you expect to see in Mindanao. We actually saw all 5 because we did find an active nest for a Philippine falconet, but the birds just won't fly into our transect. So all of those observations were made outside of the transect, so that data is not included here. They just wouldn't cooperate. We also were able to establish the beginning of the breeding season for the Philippine serpent eagle. So we tried our surveys at different times of the year, and we would really only start seeing serpent eagles in courtship display towards like mid-October. So of the 13 species are 3 migratory non-resident species, and then there are 5 forest specialists, including all of our endemic species, and then 5 habitat generalists. The serpent eagles and the Brahminy kites were the more commonly observed birds. And if you spent any time at all looking for raptors in Philippine forests, you would say, yeah, this makes sense. These are usually the first 2 birds that you would see. So this is the serpent eagle. It's endemic and it's a year-round resident. And on the other side is the Brahminy kites. It's non-endemic and it's also a year-round resident. And then we wanted to also characterize any differences in occupancy between these forest specialists and these habitat generalists. And it just turns out that our 2 most commonly observed species represent each one. So our serpent eagles are forest specialists and our Brahminy kites are habitat generalists. So we found more Brahminy kites around montane forests. So that's the first 3 bars. And then we found more serpent eagles around dipterocarp forests, which is the last 2 bars. So if you're wondering why we have 5 and not 6 areas, that's because there's really no such thing as a severely disturbed dipterocarp forest. Because since it's lowland, if it's severely disturbed, it really would be converted into something else completely, like agricultural land or some rich man's house. So it would no longer be a forest. So you won't really find those. And then what we did after is we used occupancy modeling in program MARC so that we can estimate detection and occupancy probabilities. And our models suggest that kites were more likely to occupy dipterocarp forests than montane forests. That's opposite of what we observed, but this is actually what we expected, and that there would be 2 to 3 times more kites than in moderately disturbed forests and other sites. And that also makes sense because what we understand of Brahminy kites, they really do prefer these open areas. You really won't find them in thick forests. So you would expect to see more of them if the areas are more open. So they would increase with within those disturbed sites. For serpent eagles, our models suggest that they are more likely to occupy dipterocarp forests. Again, this is what we expected. And that the models also suggest that disturbance would reduce abundance of these serpent eagles. So we always suspected this, but now we have a model to support that. And this is, if you recall, opposite for the Brahminy kites. In general, we observe fewer forest specialists and more habitat generalists than our models predicted. And at least for now, we think this can be because of one of at least 2 things. So the first is that forest specialists are forest interior species. And because our transects, they don't always go across the forest, then maybe road surveys may not be the most appropriate method to survey for them. My study is actually the first one to use road surveys for surveying raptors in the Philippines. And the most commonly used method is by occupying these observation points that are on ridge tops. So obviously those observation points will have better advantages of the forested area than your road surveys. This was me in 2003. This was my very first field survey to look for Philippine eagles. And this man I married, my husband's not here, so I can't embarrass him, but I see a friend in the call, so you can just embarrass him for me. Where was I? Okay, so this is the more commonly used method. However, when we did concurrent observations between these fixed observation posts and our road surveys, even though we standardized our efforts, fewer raptors, forest specialists or otherwise, were actually recorded from our fixed observation post. So that surprised me. And we did this in 2014 because I wanted to make sure that the road survey was an appropriate method. We even got to record the Philippine Eagle multiple times across different sites using our road survey. And those are rare birds and they're definitely forest specialists. So it looks like the survey type really isn't driving the trends that we observe, where we are not recording as many forest specialists as we thought, especially since we're actually surveying around forests. So our alternate hypothesis is a little grim, and that's whatever forest remains, it's actually not suitable for our forest specialists. So if you recall that we've actually underestimated our forest specialists and we've overestimated our habitat generalists, if you recall that these species have opposite land cover needs, you have one bird that needs the forest and actually doesn't like disturbance, and another bird that likes open spaces and is fine with it, then also recognize that road surveys is an appropriate method for this kind of study. So if you put all of that together, then you're left with this data that seems to support the hypothesis that the forests are highly degraded, really highly degraded, and they're really not suitable for the forest specialists anymore. So the patterns that we observe likely reflect the magnitude of anthropogenic changes in the Philippines, and the loss of natural environments actually impact greatly our forest specialists. And this is really especially significant for the Philippine serpent eagle, because it's not just a forest specialist, it's also an endemic species. So it's going to be more vulnerable than than those widespread habitat generalists. And if deforestation continues at its current rate, the conservation status of the serpent eagle, which is at the moment they are least concerned, we may have to reconsider that conservation status. And one of our biggest take home from all of this, which is our big conclusion and is also a really good reminder, is that these common species are greatly impacted by environmental change. And we see that with serpent eagles because they're really not as common as advertised. They're not as easy to find and they're not as easy to count. Like there's not as many of them as you really would expect had the forest been in better condition. And this statement is really just a great reminder, especially for places like the Philippines, because we tend to overlook our common species and we focus just on our endangered birds. For example, in the Philippines, raptor research is synonymous with this magnificent bird, and I'm in love with this bird, so I don't fault that, right? But as one of the rarest and most critically endangered eagles in the entire world, gathering data on Philippine eagles is extremely difficult. And I know because I tried, I worked on Philippine eagles for a couple of years. But maybe when we start looking at our common species, we may even get insights on the fate of these rarer and harder to find species. So with that, I'd like to thank all of these wonderful people. The study was funded by the Project SOAR grant of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, the Sperry Fund Scholars for Raptor Conservation Science, the American Philosophical Society, Burnham Fund, and Peregrine Fund. I'd love to take your questions, but if you can't think of any now and you would like to ask me later, this is my email address. Please hit me up. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille, for being on time. In fact, you are you're earlier than time, yeah? So, yeah, we open up for questions from anyone from the floor.
Jelaine, I see. I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah. From Jilingan, hi ma'am, thanks for the great talk. Why did the model predict differently from observation with regards to the habitat of the Brahmani kite? Montaigne
So the thing is, we use the occupancy models within Program Mark, and Program Mark may not really be the most appropriate method for these analysis. Because we saw that, we wanted to make sure that what the models is suggesting is really, really what we're seeing. Because, you know, sometimes we see the data raw and then you do your analysis, you see something completely different. So it can just be that, but it can also be just, we have to find a more appropriate analysis. And I'm actually working on that now. I'm using unmarked in R, and I haven't finished because I'm lazy. But the results that I've seen so far, they're really not that different from what we see using Program Mark. So I don't think after reanalysis, the outcomes are going to be that much different. Maybe just the estimates are going to be different. So it can be one of two things, Jelaine. It can be really just us taking raw data and making the models tell the story, which is sometimes that's just really what happens, or it's just not the appropriate technique for now. And to solve that, we're just going to use the more traditional methods and see what happens. So I'll finish it sometime. I'll do it sometime.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Camille. Any other questions? All right. Okay, there's one from Hang Kyu Kim. If adding information from non-roads inside forests, do you think the detection probabilities would be different?
It'll actually be harder to find them if you're underneath the forest. And I actually had this conversation with Jelaine because Jelaine is the only other person I know who's done road surveys for birds of prey, and she did it after this. We did consider that, but what we also find is if you're under the forest, you're really not going to see anything. A lot of these birds are soaring birds, and the ones that aren't soaring birds, they're just going to be, you know, like just where you can't see them. So I don't think it's really going to change it that much. even people who do transect walks for like just avian surveys in general, they don't really get to record a lot of birds of prey in the first place. And that's why the go-to method is to step out of the forest and to look from above the forest. We did try, but it's a nice walk, but it's just not really worth the time if you're looking for birds of prey. It's just the forests are too thick. If the forests are there, they're just too dense that you can't really see any birds of prey. Except for falconets. You'll see the falconets. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
All right. There's another. Okay, I think this is a comment based on your explanation. Very different approach compared to songbird surveys. All right. Okay. Any last question before we proceed to the next presenter? All right. Okay. I guess we thank you, Camille, for sharing with us. Yeah, on your survey, which is very, very interesting. And we proceed the session with our next presenter. Yeah. So yeah, all right. So our next presenter is Chen Hung from the Raptor Research Group of Taiwan. All right, and he will be sharing with us on the conflict of greens in offshore wind energy development from the perspective of raptor migration in East Asia. So Chen Hung, the floor is yours. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let me share my screen. Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Jiang Hongyang from Raptor Research Group of Taiwan. And it's a pity that we can only make up virtually today. That's really a pity. So I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy at home and enjoying this symposium. And I have to apologize that I will turn off my camera before I starting my talk to let the internet move smooth. Okay. With the change of time, the human population is getting crowded, and more construction expand out, not only in the urban area. And now you may see any kind of building standing in the middle of farm area or on the top of mountain or deep into the desert and even on the ocean. That's really incredible. Today, I'm going to focus on offshore wind farms and give just a brief review of the potential impact on raptor migration in East Asia. Last year, COP26 was held in Glasgow in Scotland. And during the meeting, the representatives around the world gathered to discuss the goals and strategies to face global climate change. And one of the targets will be net zero carbon emission and keep the temperature increase less than 1.5 degrees by 2050. It means that we need to transition our energy use to cleaner energy. It's not an easy task. In order to achieve this target, every country needs to develop its own policy to schedule and accomplish it in stages. I use the policy of my country, Taiwan, as an example here. Taiwanese government set up a target in the first stage that 20% of the energy use will be from renewable energy by 2025. And to achieve this target, we need to work on 4 different aspects at the same time. And one of these 4 aspects is the development of offshore wind energy. And we set the target for offshore wind energy is 5.7 gigawatt by 2025. It means there will be hundreds of wind turbines will set up on the Taiwanese Ocean. There will be hundreds of wind turbines, and that's not happened before. East Asia has potential wind resources in some areas of the ocean. From this map, I changed my point. As you can see, the dark red area means there has better wind resources. So the area between like Taiwan and China, Taiwan and the Philippines, or the east of Vietnam, or in the higher latitude area, they are all evaluated as a suitable place to develop offshore wind energy. Offshore wind farm is constructed on the ocean, away from where we live. It is supposed not to have much impact on human beings compared to the development on land. However, there are still many other creatures that use this habitat. If we are going to put many wind turbines there, we should also evaluate their potential impact, even if there is no human living there. Offshore wind farms may potentially affect birds in many different ways. 3 aspects are usually pointed out in the literatures. The first one is the barrier effect. No matter the size of the wind farm, you have to build wind turbine over there. The wind farm may create an obstruction on the bird's regular flight paths or migration route that would possibly stop the bird or make them detour during their flying. But just like this raptors, migratory raptors, some probably fly very high or not fly across this area. It won't matter to them, but if there's some raptors fly across this wind turbine, it will be a problem. They have to stop or they have to detour. And if they're still flying across or into this wind farm, like these 2 birds, the collision with turbine is possible. It just fly into the black area. And the third one, displacement. The established wind farm possibly caused the bird that originally lived in this area to lose their habitat. Just like probably osprey spending a lot of time on the sea. Maybe this is their preying area, hunting area. It causes a displacement. So, but there are already many studies working on the impact of offshore wind farms on seabirds in Europe. But how about migratory raptors? It's rarely being mentioned. So raptors usually tend to avoid flying across large surfaces of water. And water is obviously a natural barrier that shapes the raptor migration flyways around the world. So As you can see, most of the raptors stay inland and migrate along the continental corridors between breeding and wintering ground. Like in America or in Europe, Africa, they usually stay inland. However, in some areas, they have no choice and must do water crossing flight, just like in East Asia where we live. There is the Eastern Asian Oceanic Flyway, which is the fifth one here. Along this flyway, raptors have no choice and need to fly across many different islands or along the across large surface of water during their migration. As I just mentioned, wind resources are abundant in many offshore areas in East Asia. There are already many offshore wind energy projects under evaluation. Here is the map reviewing the ongoing or proposing offshore wind farms. You can get this information from the website 4C Offshore. Along the coast of China or South Korea or Japan and Taiwan and Vietnam, a lot of areas have been put into consideration for future development. China is now the biggest market in Asia, and the market in other countries is also growing very fast. I believe this area was selected probably because of its potential wind resources or the cost considerations. However, has any environmental issue been put into consideration too? So after China, Taiwan has already had some offshore wind farms under operation in the past couple of years. Some others are under construction and many more are already in the planning stage. The area shown on this map in the West Taiwan are the offshore wind farms which have got the permission to build before 2025. So all these squares are the offshore wind farm has get permission. And in South Korea, there are also a few offshore wind farms under operation in South Korea, which is marked as a red star, red cross. Although the capacity is still very small, it's just about 150 megawatts. There are already many more areas in the south or in the west of this country that has been scheduled to develop. And in Japan, offshore wind development is still in its very beginning stage. None of the offshore wind farms has been constructed for now. But just like the other countries mentioned, developing offshore wind energy is the necessary step for energy transition in the near future. Besides these countries, Vietnam, the Philippines, or other countries are also doing the similar things now. Since we have the information of where they are going to develop wind energy, the most important thing is to figure out if there are any environmental issues that need to be concerned in these proposed areas. As an eBirder, I'm thinking maybe I can find some information through eBird. eBird is almost the biggest database in the world right now, that most of the birders or surveyors upload their birding records into eBird. So I reviewed eBird to try to find out if there is any raptor sighting recorded within these areas. First, I start from the most abundant migratory raptor in the East Asian Oceanic Flyway, Chinese sparrowhawk. The grid on this map means the place that has birding checklist submission. all is great. And the pink one is the gray with Chinese sparrowhawk record. And the gray one here means there's no record. So as you can see, compared to abundant grays on land, only a few grays are on the ocean. It seems that it's not easy to do bird watching in the ocean. Luckily, there are two records of Chinese sparrowhawk here, just in the area between Taiwan and China. But however, as far as I know, these two records are reported by the crew on the working vessel of the offshore wind farm, who is also a birder. In other words, these two sightings are recorded during the construction, not before it. But during that time, there's still no wind turbine being set up. So, and these two records are what I got from these areas through eBird only. That's the only two records I have. The second most abundant migratory raptor is gray-faced buzzard. You can see there are many records on the small island along this flyway. But unlike the Chinese sparrowhawk, there's no any sighting reported on this ocean. There's no record. And for oriental honey buzzard, there's no record on this ocean too. So there could be many reasons that can expand the rare field records on this ocean, especially observation on the ocean is not like doing the same thing on land. It's more difficult and very limited to the weather condition. And also not many people have opportunities to take a vessel sailing out for bird watching. It would cost a lot. So I'm not surprised that the sighting records on this ocean is rare. And in Taiwan, the offshore wind farm has been developed in the past decade. During the development, doing environment impact assessment is necessary in the early planning stage to gather permission for construction. From the first demonstration of offshore wind farm until now, there are already 30 EIA reports from 28 projects being reviewed. Time duration span from 2011 to 2019 for almost 10 years. All these reports are public and they provide us first-hand variable environment data from the unprecedented large-scale marine survey in Taiwan. After reviewing this EIA report, 78 species of birds have been recorded in this proposed area within Taiwan Strait. But can you imagine how many raptor species in this area recorded?
It is a path or a straight line along.
There are only 4 species of raptor recorded in this proposed area during these 9 years. Just only 4 species. And the number of individuals of each species is also very, very less. The 4 species are Chinese sparrowhawk, osprey, kestrel, and eastern marsh harrier. You can find them on the map with the corresponding dark color. Most of these sightings are recorded in the area close to the coast. Only 2 records are distant to the coast, and both are osprey. And they tend to fly in a low height over the ocean. And this one, the orange dot, is Chinese sparrowhawk. Although the location of the raptor is close to the coast too. But let report it, there are 13 individuals and the flight height is about 100 meters, which is within the high risk zone of the collision. Although the EIA reports have shown some variable data collected on the ocean, we all know that it's difficult to extend this survey to a long-term monitoring with a reasonable effort. Maybe we can find some evidence from the land-based monitoring. Long-term raptor watch have been established in many countries in Asia. In Taiwan, there are many different raptor watch sites. Every spring or autumn, the surveyor will gather in the watch site to come and appreciate the massive raptor migration. And the long-term monitoring provides us the evidence that abundant raptors are migrating through Taiwan. So like every year in Tanding, the southern tip of Taiwan, you can see around at least 20,000 or even more than 50,000 of gray-faced buzzards heading south migrate to the Philippines. And in spring,
Chen Hong, you
Yes.
have another 2 more minutes to complete.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go back to via Taiwan to the breeding ground again. But we still don't know the exact migration route over the ocean by the data only collected from the local network. And in Japan, there are also a lot of raptor watch sites, and the data can go back to 20 years ago. That's amazing. And in the 88, this place Tsushima is between the place between South Korea and Japan. And here you can count the Chinese sparrowhawk flying from South Korea to Japan in a very massive number. So that you cannot there's a corridor between South Korea and Japan around this place. And by slide tracking data, you can help us get more detailed flight data, even if we don't see them. Here is some gray-faced buzzard like our GT checked 10 years ago. We start checking them in Taiwan and track them to their breeding and wintering ground. But the exact location where they depart from the ocean or where they land to the other side is still poorly known. The technology nowadays is totally different than before, so I believe it will be possible to make it more clear if someone is able to initiate a new checking study now. And if we have a large sample size of satellite tracking, we can also make some predictions by modern tracking data. So on this map from Norali's paper in 2016, so you can see there is a migration corridor of Oriental honey buzzard in East China Sea and also in the area around Tsushima. So let's go back to the map that shows the development of offshore wind farm in East Asia. Many players under consideration overlap with the possible raptor migration corridors. Now we should put it into consideration and choose the development areas very carefully. So green energy is necessary for us to face global climate change. That's no doubt. But from the perspective of raptor migration, the environment issue is also very important. We should also put it into consideration during the evaluation, especially before we decide where to send the offshore wind farm. Just a couple days ago, Korea posted an article about their future work and also mentioned about the issue of offshore wind farm, and then draw this corridor to reveal the problem. So it is very important to get this information and negotiate to the industry. So actually, ARRCN has a migration survey project 20 years start from 20 years ago. And it's amazing that we can connect each other from different countries, different raptor watch site. And this kind of data is very important. Just like Sishi just mentioned, we need to put this data up public or share to each other. And it can get us more information to face the climate change and the development after this, all this like energy transition issue. So I believe it's possible to put everything together and keep it well both for energy transition or for environmental issues. If we can evaluate from every aspect properly and make the plan very careful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chen Hong, for your presentation. We open for discussion for any question. Probably we can open for one question, yeah, for Chen Hong's session. Is there anyone who would like to ask any question? Okay. All right. So far, it is very interesting to see all the four presenters have actually shown the impact, yeah, of environmental changes, whether it be it landscape change, you know, human activities, how it has actually influenced the different aspects of raptor migration, raptor population in a certain area and country. So it is actually very interesting to see also how different groups, yeah, like Chen Hong from the Raptor research group in Taiwan, as well as by Petra, the group on gun, how they are actually collecting data, yeah, to get a more concerted effort to monitor raptors, which I think is really great. Yeah. Okay, if we do not have any question, or if you know you have a personal, you prefer to ask Chen Hong personally, please feel free to get in contact with Chen Hong after this. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Chen Hong.
Thank you.
We shall proceed with the next presenter. Thank you, Luke, for coming in. And Luke is actually from the Peregrine Fund from USA. And Luke will be sharing with us on updated range metrics and a global population estimate for the critically endangered Philippine eagle. Yeah. And with that, Luke, we pass the session to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Evelyn. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay, so thanks everyone for coming to my talk today. So yeah, as Evelyn said, my name is Luke Sutton. I'm a postdoc at the Peregrine Fund. And I'm currently working on the Global Raptor Impact Network. My talk today is for my research on Philippine Eagle spatial ecology. I'd first just like to thank my colleagues and co-authors from the Peregrine Fund and the Philippine Eagle Foundation for all their hard work contributing to this project. So today I'm going to talk to you about how we can use species models to calculate IUCN range metrics and a global population estimate for the Philippine eagle. So the Philippine eagle is one of the most threatened raptors globally, currently classified as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. It's endemic to 4 islands in the Philippines, distributed across the lowland and montane tropical moist forest. Now, the population has declined drastically over the past 50 years, as I'm sure many of you will probably know. This is mainly due to habitat loss and persecution. Now, despite its high extinction risk, fundamental aspects of the species biology, such as distribution and population size, are still uncertain, and these need updating. So the ARRCN Red List uses 3 spatial range metrics that define species distributions and inform extinction risk assessments. The first 2 are extent of occurrence and area of occupancy. An extent of occurrence represents the upper bound of the species distribution, measuring the degree of geographic range risk spread using a minimum convex polygon around all known occurrences. Now, conversely, area of occupancy represents the lower bound of the species distribution, quantifying the cells where the species actually occurs, and so is linked to population size. Now, recently, the ARRCN developed a new range metric, and this is termed area of habitat, and this is defined as the extent of a habitat for a species within its range, in general using land cover and elevation layers. So estimating the area of habitat is important, and this is because it can be used in conservation risk assessments, quantifying parameters such as habitat loss and protected area coverage, for example. So here on the left, we can see the current ARRCN range map for the Philippine Eagle within the hash blue polygons, with the extent of occurrence polygon bordered by the blue dot dash line. So here's the current extent of occurrence from the ARRCN. However, we define the species accessible area as the mainland area of all known range islands, the Mindanao, Leyte, Samar, and Luzon, and we base these on ecoregions. So these correspond to either lowland or montane tropical forest. Now, for Luzon, we actually masked out the tropical pine forest ecoregion north of the island here. And this is because the Philippine eagle is a habitat specialist of tropical moist forests, and so they're unlikely to occur in this ecoregion. So most research on Philippine eagles has been done on the island of Mindanao, and so occurrence data are obviously biased towards this island. And population size for Mindanao estimates between 82 and 233 breeding pairs, and extrapolating this figure across all range islands suggests a global total of between 340 and 500 pairs. However, pair densities on other range islands, especially Luzon, are unknown. Now, because of this, there is no agreed global population size estimate for the species, despite it being a raptor of high conservation concern. So we compiled occurrences from the Global Raptor Impact Network, which is the GRIN data information system for population monitoring for all raptor species. This is led by the Peregrine Fund. I think tomorrow my colleague Chris McClure will be elaborating more on the data information system. Now, for the Philippine Eagle, GRIN includes presence data consisting of nest locations from unstructured surveys conducted on Mindanao by the Philippine Eagle Foundation, along with community science data from eBird, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So in addition, we included GPS tracking data from 6 breeding adults from the island of Mindanao and pooled this with the nest and community science data to better represent habitat use in our models. So the GPS tracking data are these clusters of blue points here, and the black points are the nest locations and community science data. So species distribution models, or SDMs, now these are predictive spatial models that infer species habitat associations by correlating species presences with raster covariates that represent the species' optimal conditions and resources. So in fact, SDMs are able to inform ARRCN range metrics and predict habitat in areas that may lack occurrence data for inclusion in red list assessments. So for our first model, we actually used an ensemble of logistic regression-based algorithms. But then we refined this in the second model just using a penalized GLM. Now this is because the single tuned algorithm actually outperforms our SDM algorithms, including ensemble average methods. So we didn't really see any real benefit in using an ensemble method compared to using a single tuned algorithm. So raster covariate layers were selected based on environmental factors related to resources and conditions influencing Philippine eagle distribution. In our first model, we used 6 layers representing climate, land cover, and human land use. But because we thought this model may be over-predicting habitat, we then developed a second updated model using covariates derived from multiple satellite remote sensing products. So in the second model, these consisted of 3 surface reflectance bands sourced from the MODIS sensor on board the NASA Terra and Aqua satellites. This band 1, red wavelength, represents plant biomass. Band 2, near infrared wavelength, this is associated with leaf and canopy structure. And band 7, shortwave infrared wavelength, this is linked to old growth biomass. We then combine these with the evergreen forest land cover layer and a leaf area index biophysical measure as before. Now, in addition, we included human footprint index as a measure of human land use in both of these models. So we calibrated our SDMs with the habitat covariates and presence data on Mindanao, and then predicted into the other less well sampled islands. And this is because most illegal occurrences in 3.5 Mindanao, as I said earlier, with sparse occurrences across the other range islands. So due to this sampling bias, we developed this model workflow to first predict habitat suitability for Mindanao, this is box 3A. Next, we then projected each Mindanao model into the Eastern Visayas and Luzon, box 3B. And before finally merging each island model into a single range-wide prediction, box 3C. And then using this final model, IUCN range metrics can be calculated based on inferred habitat from the continuous and binary predictions, and this follows IUCN Redlist guidelines. So our initial models for Mindanao using climate and land cover and the ensemble workflow predicted reasonably well, but they failed to predict to areas known to have nesting pairs in the east of the island. However, when we use the updated model covariates with a single penalised GLM, this is actually able to better predict the known nesting areas in the east of the island of Mindanao with a more realistic area of habitat based on expert validation. So on Mindanao, the largest continuous areas of habitat were confined to mountainous areas with high forest cover across the eastern, central, and southern mountain ranges. So for the range-wide predictions using climate and land cover layers in the first model, we projected the Mindanao model into the other range islands. And this again predicted reasonably well, but likely over-predicted the eastern Visayas and Luzon. However, using the updated model covariates, the range-wide continuous model was able to capture key areas of habitat projected to Luzon and eastern Visayas and a more realistic distribution. So for the eastern Visayas, highest habitat suitability was predicted in a small area of northeastern Samar, this region here. And only small patches of high suitability habitat were predicted for Leyte. In fact, you can see the difference for Leyte in the two models. In Luzon, the largest continuous area of Philippine Eagle habitat was predicted along the Sierra Madres mountain range in the east of the island, so along here. And then further high suitability habitat was also predicted in the north of Luzon, where nests have been recently found, and also for the Zambales mountain range far west of Luzon. So then we reclassified these continuous range-wide models to binary predictions to calculate area of habitat. So from our first model using climate and land cover, we calculated an area of habitat of just under 50,000 square kilometres. And from this model area of habitat, I'm using the word model to distinguish it from the IUCN area of habitat. Maximum extent of occurrence was roughly 610,000 square kilometres. And minimum extent of occurrence was nearly 274,000 square kilometres, with an area of occupancy of 54,695 square kilometres. So maximum extent of occurrence includes all the area within the minimum convex polygon. And this follows IUCN Redlist guidelines, but we also use the minimum extent of occurrence, which only includes the land area within that minimum convex polygon. So essentially not including areas that could never be occupied over the ocean. And we think this is a more relevant range metric for island ranging species, such as the Philippine Eagle. So using the updated model covariates to reclassify a binary model calculated an area of habitat of just over 23,000 square kilometres, so less than half that from the first model. And then from the modelled area of habitat, both maximum and minimum extent of occurrence and area of occupancy were similar, and there's no real difference in these metrics. So it's area of habitat that changes dependent on which covariates we use. So we calculated the number of breeding pairs that our area of habitat estimates could support as directly related to the available habitat within a given home range required by a breeding pair of eagles. And we based the habitat area required for each pair on home range estimates from 6 breeding adults fitted with satellite telemetry tags. We calculated home range sizes using 3 different estimators. This gave us a range of habitat area estimates for calculating population size. So using the median home range size from the kernel density estimate of 73 square kilometres, we then calculated the median population size and a range of minimum to maximum population sizes using a local convex hull and a 99% minimum convex polygon. We then calculated the potential breeding pairs that our area of habitat could support using the formulation seen here. And we used the IE7 red list definitions for population size as the total number of mature individuals across a species range. And then we divided T hat by 2 to give the number of potential breeding pairs. So here we can see that from our first model, we estimated 677 breeding pairs based on climate and land cover covariates. But then it's estimate more than half to 318 breeding pairs and use the modus covariates in the updated model. Then when we look at population estimates for each island based on the climate and land cover model, we get similar estimates for both Mindanao and Luzon, with a higher population size than previous estimates for Leyte and Samar. However, from the updated model, population sizes generally fit within the range of previous estimates, with the area of habitat in Mindanao potentially holding 196 pairs, in Luzon 105 pairs, and in the eastern Visayas 17 pairs. So you can see the difference in each island prediction. So a key advantage of using MODIS satellite remote sensing data means constant monitoring can be established for area of habitat, population size, and protected area coverage. So we've set these baselines, but it now means that rapid action can be taken to tackle emerging threats when needed. So data is being constantly collected by the MODIS sensor on 1 to 2 day orbits, meaning regular assessments can be done for all these metrics we've outlined here today. We're also conducting a gap analysis using the updated model to assess protected area coverage and identify potential reintroduction sites. And you can see here the projected model for Leyte and Samar and how effective the protected area network is for covering important areas of habitat. So the KBA, the key biodiversity area, are in the white polygons, and protected areas are in the black border polygons. So this helps us identify which key biodiversity areas should be prioritised for protection. This will also help us identify priority sites for introductions to areas of habitat which are within protected areas. And we also plan to ground truth these with exploratory surveys guided by the models. But finally, we're also in the early stages of integrating population viability analysis with SDMs, and there's more to follow on this soon. So finally, I'd like to thank all individuals and organisations who contributed data to GRIN, especially staff and volunteers from the Philippine Eagle Foundation. Also thank the Peregrine Fund for help financing my postdoc and the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust for funding. There's my email there if you'd like to get in contact. Now this is currently in review, but we also have a preprint on the bioarchive server based on the results from the first model. I've recently started this and it's going for review at the moment. So thanks for listening, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, for sharing with us on your work. We open for any questions from members in the room. Okay, from Jeline, she's asking, I might have missed it, but what evaluation method did you use to evaluate the models, and how did the two models compare?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Yeah, I didn't actually put up the evaluation metrics. So we used a metric called continuous voice index, which is similar to a Spearman rank correlation. And the metrics that they were all above 0.9. And whether we used an ensemble model or single penalized GLM, they were all extremely high. We settled on using a penalized GLM, mainly because the other two models we used in the ensemble were GAMS and multivariate adaptive regression splines. And it's often better just to use, in this case where we've got presence-only data, to use the penalized logistic regression, which is based on the Maxent algorithm. And this is ideal for presence-only data. And so the accuracy metrics were, for all models, were very high, but we settled on the penalized GLM just because it's more appropriate for the presence-only data that we have.
Thank you, Luke. Any more questions? All right. Another question from Ross. Have you looked at how fragmented grids may influence estimation on number of pairs?
I'm not sure. What does what does it mean by fragmented grids? I'm not sure what that means.
Probably Ross, would you like to clarify on your question? Please feel free to unmute yourself, yeah? Okay. Yep.
Okay,
Minimum terrain.
right. Yeah. Yeah, good question. It's one thing we don't actually know. Something I'm working on now is are more detailed home range estimates and habitat use from telemetry data. So I don't actually know the answer to that question. It's the quick answer to that.
Yep. Okay.
A good question.
All right. Okay. Any last question before we proceed with the next presenter, Michael? All right. If there isn't, thank you very much, Luke, for okay. From Camille. Based on the field observation, there are Philippine eagle breeding pairs that use fragmented forests, and they are prolific.
That's interesting. What we definitely welcome here is if there are other researchers out there that have observations of Philippine eagles, we would always welcome to share those observations. And part of the GRIN system is to recognise other researchers' contributions, and that through co-authorship. So if people are willing to share that, then just reach out to me, email me. We're always happy to collaborate.
All right. Thank you very much, Luke, and thank you very much for all the questions put up in the chat. And we shall proceed to the next session. Yeah. Thank you once again, Luke. All right. While waiting for the technical team to sort out the tech issues, we will have Michael in with us to share on his study, which is the Northwesterniana Flyway, Luzon, Philippines, a 5-year raptor monitoring research in a changing environment and extreme climatic conditions. Michael, we pass the session to you. Yeah.
Can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me. So this is our 5-year research and the migration as well as the resident raptors of the northwestern Luzon, which started in 2015. And with my co-authors, Tiangco, Cervero, Palting Gaspar, and Pongtilan. So this is a collaborative research with a support funded by the Asian Raptor Research and Conservation Network, partly with support to from the Raptor Research, Raptor Network Philippines, as well as the Northwestern University. And the Northwestern Luzon is in proximity to Taiwan, play a conduit to migrating raptors that enters the Philippine archipelago. And it is a major flyway, aside from the Central Cordilleras and the Sierra Madre in the east. The Northwestern University Biological Diversity Research Unit, together with the Raptor Watch Network Philippines, collaborated in a 5-year full spring season monitoring in the month of March to May. And today, the changing vegetation as a result of frequent super typhoons, infrastructures, and human exploitations are challenging the conservation initiatives of the university, the NGOs, and the national agencies, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in Region 1. And these areas, migration stopovers, document the migration flyway, and to test the forest cover on this migration, we conducted a biodiversity assessment to these areas, and we identified 3 major vegetation, which is a protected area along the major flyway, and we assessed the floristic composition to check or determine the health of these stopovers if they could harbor the migration flux every year. So here are the 3 sites, which is the northernmost is the observation site that we are using for the spring migration. And the 2 other sites in the south are auxiliary monitoring sites, also to check the other migration species that passes through this protected landscape or forest. And in here we have the 3 sites wherein Mount Palimlem, that is adjacent forest in our annual observation site, which is the highest in species richness. And it is considered as a key biodiversity area as well as an important bird area. That is why our monitoring team is located at that site. And there are also other floristic observation in which we were able to tailor the occurrence of migrating raptors all throughout the northwestern part of the island Luzon. And we were able to check the floristic composition of this forest, and in order as a basis for a reforestation whenever there are natural disasters that strikes the region. So these are the threats to the vegetation along the migration flyways. First is super typhoons are becoming frequent, and if you check the annual occurrence of typhoon, the typhoon passes almost half of the archipelago towards Taiwan and Japan. And this is the main concern why we are monitoring the forest fragments along the migration flyway. So I'll continue. So,
All right.
So here are the annual scenario of what we experience in the northwestern part of the island Luzon, wherein the notable forest stopovers of these migrating raptors are devastated by typhoon floods, as well as the occurrence of torrential rain during June to August also gives erosion to the forest, not only during typhoon areas season, also in the November to January, the occurrence of the northeast monsoon also gives a turbulent wind, cold temperature in the northern Luzon. So this makes the climatic condition very very harsh climatic condition experienced in the north western tip of the island Luzon. And during summer, after the very cold northeast winds, we have a very, very high or extreme heat. We have recorded 51 degrees heat index in May 8 of 2021. And that's the ending part of the spring migration. So both experiences very cold and very hot, which makes the migration also difficult for the raptors. And it results to a natural calamity such as a forest fire, because the vegetation becomes susceptible to fire. And the loss of the forest cover may directly affect the status of the migrating raptors in their stopovers. So this is the East Asian Australasian Flyway, and this is the Northwesterniana, where there are also the Cordillera identified in the central part of Luzon. And we suspect also that there is an east road, which is the Sierra Madre Flyway. But we are focused in the northwestern part of the island, and we call it the Northwesterniana Flyway. So we were able to monitor, here we have monitoring sites for the gray face buzzard, and we were able to tailor the routes, and that passes through the northwestern slope slice of the northwest Luzon. And during the spring migration, this is the pattern of the migrating raptors. And in 2019, we were able to complete major flyways. However, these major flyways are affected by, again, the changing coastal landscape because of the infrastructures, such as the wind turbines. These are the entry of the migrating raptors during the autumn migration. Also, the constructions of the solar panels also constricted the vegetation, which also may divert the migration of our raptors, and they prefer a more dense vegetation as their stopovers. Also, the expansions of the airport, which is identified also as part of the migration route, is also critical and will it is vulnerable to the passing raptors. And in here we identified or counted the species that passes all through these monitoring sites, and we identified 10 migrants, 4 endemics, 4 residents. And with the 5-year monitoring research, we conducted full spring from March 1 to May 14, and that's 60 to 75 days in the observation site. I think we are one of the longest monitoring group probably in Asia, who spent almost 75 days observing in the wild. And we have here the data which we were able to monitor or record 105,280 species in population in 2019 from 62,000 in 2015. So here are some of the observed species. We have the Bezra, Chinese sparrowhawks, the Japanese sparrowhawks, the Eurasian kestrel. We have the peregrine falcon, the resident, as well as the migrant calidus. We have also the Brahminy kite, the black-eared kite, which is a migrant, the grayface buzzard, also a migrant. We have here a resident common buzzard. So we separate the common buzzard from the migrant, which is the eastern or Japanese buzzard. And we have the Philippine honey buzzard, which is a resident. And we also identified a migrant, which is also another oriental honey buzzard. Here is a osprey, a migrant, the Philippine falconet, the Philippine serpent eagle, the northern Philippine hawk eagle, the rufous-bellied hawk eagle, and last is the white-bellied sea eagle, which are all present in the 3 major observation sites located in the protected areas, as mentioned in the earlier in the slides. So summary, the Northwestern is a major flyway. Migrating raptors arrive during October and exist from March to May. Fluctuating population counts is due to the diversion of exit routes. This is just a proximity to the province of Cagayan. In 2015, there are initial tally of 27,652, but recorded a decline in 2017 and 2018. However, in 2019, we recorded almost 37,036 for the grayface buzzard. And in 2017 and 2018, probably because of the typhoon, 2 super typhoon that devastated the area. So we had a very, very low count. The changing vegetation landscapes also as a result of infrastructures development may divert flyways, and the construction of more wind turbines can totally disrupt the Northwesterniana migration route. So a long-term monitoring should be done to check the broader scope of the grayface buzzard and other raptors in Ilocos and Cagayan area. Island monitoring in the extreme northern Luzon should also be done to calibrate the annual count, and more in-depth research done by university researchers in order to have a vivid analysis on the migration pattern and possible causal factors that affect their population during wintering flights. Study on the effect of turbines and migration route and the effects of natural calamities to vegetation along the migration pathways or feeding grounds. So thank you to the Asian Raptor Research and Conservation Network Conference 2022, the Raptor Watch Network Philippines, the NUEBG Biodiversity Research Unit, the local government of Pagudpud and Panshan Beach Resort for accommodating our researchers, and our university for allowing us to conduct this research. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your sharing. We shall open it up for question and answer. Yep. Okay, we have from Camille. How were the projected spring migration patterns modeled? Yeah.
We did not use a modeling application, but we geotag the occurrence of migrating flyways, and we put it in the map, and we tailor all those GPS tagging and put it in the map. Then we connect all the dots to assume that those are major flyways. But after 5 years, some of the geotag sites are not persistent observation sites. So we remove all those and we only remain those that has persistent flying raptors. So we only use the mapping and as an actual, but not an application, statistical analysis or modeling applications.
Okay, another one from Camille, yeah, Michael. Can you explain what you mean by geotagging the flyways, and did you have a series of sites where you made observations?
So there are only 3 major observation sites wherein we count our migrating raptors. The geotag sites are those areas that some of our members are monitoring. There are insight counting researchers there are also moving that monitor the different areas to check the movement of these flyways all along the forest towards the south or towards the north of the observation site. So that is how we predict the flyways, and not just because we do not use tracking device, but we only use an actual observation under flyways.
All right. Okay. Any last question from the group? All right. Our next presenter would be Dia. But before that, thank you very much, Michael, for sharing with us on your study on Northwestern Flyway in Luzon, Philippines. And we shall then proceed with the next presenter, Dia Wara Restiati from the Asosiasi Anthropology Indonesia, Jakarta, Indonesia, sharing with us on Jawa's owl trading in the pandemic era. Dia, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm
Yes,
here.
we can hear you.
Can hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear your voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, Dia. Is your slide on? Because what we are seeing now is actually the folder, your folder.
Can see my...
We are not seeing your slide at the moment, but we are seeing your folder. Yes. Yeah. Would you? You can probably stop share and then share the screen again. Yeah. All right. Okay, over to you, Dia.
Okay, can see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation. Probably you may want to put it on like full screen, yeah? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, everybody. They're still with me in very afternoon times. My topic is about Java's owl trading in pandemic era. And I'm from the Anthropologists Association of Indonesia, or AAI. So I will speak about the owl from anthropologist perspective. So the data collecting that I collect in this research, I use the online trading monitoring in Facebook, market survey, and interview the informant who involved in trading of owl, online trading owl. And what I mean with the Java owls is owl who live in Java Island. So it's not a point to the one specific owl like a Java scoop owl, but the owl who live in Java Island. The background is in 2017, Indonesian Owl Trading Research of Vincent Nijman, anthropologist of Offshore Workers University, saw that less 10 years since last research in 2007, Indonesia owl trading has already increased a lot. And there's 13,000 of owl with display in market. And in the monitoring that I did in 2018 and 2019, about there is 100 of owl with display in bird market. Then Java owl trading has already moved in different way, which in from online trading to online trading. That's why I do the monitoring trading online. The online trading became first choice because it's more safer and the seller could be hide their identity, mostly connected with the protected Java owl trading like Otus aligeni, Javan scoop owl, or Celepuk Jawa. From the Java owl trading online monitoring, is estimate about one of Java owl sold each day in one community group of owl trading. Meanwhile, there are 3 active community group of owl trading. So it means that during 2018, there are 795 of Java owl sold. And this situation still go on until 2019. And fortunately has decreased little by little when I did the Owl for All social media campaign and offline campaign to stop the online Java owl trading. My campaign also backed up with the Ministry of Forestry and Environmental and BKSDA. And in early 2000, the pandemic of COVID-19 hit Indonesia and has big effect to Java owl trading. I think the Java owl trading both online and offline will gone forever, but I found out that the Java owl trading still exists and there is a tendency to increase in the end of 2000, mostly for the unprotected owl like Java barn owl or Serak Java and Sunda scoop owl or Celepuk Reban. My question is, what the reason of Java people still engaged with Java owl trading in pandemic era? And how the impact of the campaign so far? I find that before pandemic 2019, trading monitoring of bird market in Jakarta, Jogja, and Surabaya, so there are 2 kinds of owls that most demanded. Otus lempiji, Sunda scoop owls, and Pito alba javanica or Java ban owl. And the price starts from 50,000 rupiah for Otus lempiji to 500,000 rupiah for Tito alba javanica. And there are minimum of 2 sellers in bird market who sold owl. And in the early pandemic 2000, only Otus lempiji still sold in bird market, which price starts from 100,000 rupiah and with food bonus. Trader said that Otus lempiji is still easy enough to find out in settlement. The cute shape, easy to take care, and more cheaper than other owls. And there's only 1 seller in bird market who sold owl. So it's a decreased trader. But in 2000 and 2021, 2020 and 2021, price of owl starts from 100,000 to 5 million. And only 2 stores who sell owls in bird market. And there are more sellers in online shop. It's like Tokopedia, Shopee, and Facebook. And the kind of owl would trade in the online shop is more varied, like Otis lampeji, Tito alba javanica, Ketupa ketupu, Bubos sumatranus, Trix seliputo, Podilus badius. And the reason of owl selling is because economy needs. So in pandemic era, many people in Indonesia, mostly in Java Island, get fired and they lose the job, and they have to find the source for economy of their household. So the economy needs is the premier reason why they sell the owls. And then there's a available market or demand. There are still people who wants keep an owl as a pet. So they ask to the seller to look for the owl and sell to them. And they thought that the owls is easy to handle than a dog or a cat. And there's a special interest for attraction or attraction in the tourism place, etc. And about All for All campaign in 2018, we target people can enjoy the all in real life, not in church or someone hosts as a pet. This campaign support many people, and in 2019, 2020, the all trading has decreased. But when the pandemic hit Indonesia, the campaign is quite ignored because people focus on facing the pandemic. And my temporary resume, because the research is still going, women as usual individual need to something or someone to express the feeling and the affection. Affection express the feeling is one on human needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dia, for your presentation. Very interesting indeed. So we proceed for any question and from any of the members in this group.
Hello.
Yes.
Lim Kim Chai from MNS in Malaysia. I have a question for Dia.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to congratulate her for her campaign, Owl for All. Yeah, that is a very interesting catchphrase, Owl for All. My question is, I believe at one time owls were used in Indonesia for black magic. Is this still in practice, and could that be part of the reason why owls are sold? Thank you.
Dia, are you still there, Dia?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. Would you like to answer the question? Did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, I can hear clearly the question.
Oh, okay. Kim Chai, would you like to repeat the question again? Yeah.
Maybe my volume is not.
Yeah.
Or maybe can write in the chat.
Or maybe I just briefly state your question, yeah, Kim Chai,
Yes.
and please correct me if I'm wrong. The question is that the owl is being used in the community in Indonesia for certain beliefs. Is it still being practiced so far?
Yes. There's some villagers in Indonesia in Java Island is still believe that owl is connected with the magic thing, the evil things, etc. But but there are many also the community of the owl lovers in our in Java Islands who keep the owl as a pet. So it's you see, so there's a two situation like there in Java Island.
So the practice of using owls for black magic is still in existence. It's still around. There are still people who use owls for black magic. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. There's some villagers that still believe the owl as a black identified as the black magic, but
for your talk.
it's already decreased in some villages.
I see. All right, thank you, Dia. Any other question from the floor? While waiting for the next question to actually pop up in the chat or being asked, I would just like to ask, what is the belief that of the local people, of the owl? Yeah. What does the owl means to them actually from the context of black magic? Yeah. Is it something of spiritual purposes, or is it more of culturistic aspects? What is it?
It's a different depends on the village in Java Islands, because Java Islands there's also a variety of the ethnic group. So the belief to owls is depends on the village, each ethnic group. My research in Dusuh Kemugang in Menoreh Hills, it saw that the village in that Dusun is a small village, believe that owl is similar with the black magic, and so they don't dare to hunt the owl, to catch the owl, or to sell the owls.
Okay, all right, interesting. I'm not sure whether that belief is actually something positive or not towards population, because that would actually deter people from poaching or even hunting for the owl. Yeah. Is there any other questions from the members in this group? All right, we have one. Asman, how many owls during the pandemic 2019-2021 from your observation, and what the reason the seller give the high prices at the pandemic than before?
Okay, it's a Bang Asman. Bang Asman asked me the question. Okay, how many owls? It's mean in trading. Okay. I only monitoring. I do the monitoring offline trading, online trading, not offline trading. So there's a five kind of owls that trade in the Facebook, and at least one individual has sold in a week. And what the reason the seller give the high price? Because some owl has difficult to find, like Bubos sumatranus and Baphoepis owl is quite hard to find out.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I guess that's the last question for you, Dia. Thank you very much, Dia, for sharing with us on raptors, but from the perspective of an anthropology. Yeah, all right. So again, we shall proceed with our last presenter, Babu. Are you there? Okay, Babu, probably could you say something so that we know that your audio is actually all right now? So let me introduce you briefly, yeah, Babu. All right. So Babu Rao is from the Salim Ali Center of Ornithology and Natural History, as well as Manipal Academy of Higher Education from India. All right. So he will be sharing with us on richness and abundance of raptors in response to wind farms in Central Karnataka, India.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Babu Rao, research scholar from Jharkhand.
Babu, sorry,
Yeah,
could you go into presentation mode?
Yeah. Just actually, I'm trying from mobile. I don't know how to do it in
Oh,
mobile.
I see. You're from trying it from a mobile, is it?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
All right. If everyone is okay, probably we just leave it this way, but we just make sure that the slides actually move on from one to another. Yeah. Okay. All right. Babu,
Sorry.
over to you.
Yeah, ma'am. Sorry. My topic is richness and abundance of raptors and response to wind farms in Central Karnataka.
Sorry, Babu. Sorry. Could you? It's very soft. Do you mind if you could speak louder?
Yeah, ma'am. Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
My topic is richness and abundance of raptors in response to wind farms in Central Karnataka. As we all know that electricity is generated from various sources like hydrocarbon, hydropower projects using solar and wind energy. The increased energy requirements leading to depletion of non-renewable energy sources like hydrocarbons. Although hydropower projects considered as renewable source of energy, but it has a lot of negative impacts on the environment. Therefore, people thought that renewable energy sources like wind energy can meet these growing energy demands, and wind-based power generation will create less impact on the environment. Therefore, it is called as clean energy source. Globally, wind-based power generation has reached more than 30 to 40% in many countries, and wind-based power generation considered as major source of energy for electricity generation. At global scale, India stands in the fourth position in electricity generation using wind energy with an installed capacity of 37,000 megawatts. About 10% of electricity generated in India comes from wind energy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, man, this fine. So, at global scale, yeah, can I start? Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. At global scale, India stands in the fourth position in generating electricity using wind energy with an installed capacity of 37,000 megawatts. About 10% of electricity generated in India comes from wind energy. Next slide. From this figure, we can clearly understand that over 17 years, from 2000 to 2017, there is an increasing trend in using wind energy in India. In future, I mean, this number may increase in tenfolds. Next slide. Although wind energy considered as clean energy source, but it has some negative effect on the environment and wildlife, mainly to establish wind farms and other infrastructure requires vast area, and this will create habitat disturbance and leads to habitat loss to the many animals. Due to this disturbances, displacement will happen in species. Species move from these disturbed sites to the less disturbed nearby locations from the windmill site. So finally, with established infrastructure, so injuries and death can occur to the bird species and other animals. So there are more than 10 states in India occur with existing wind farms, but the impact of wind farms on birds and other animals was not studied extensively. Very little information is available from few locations in India like Gujarat and Maharashtra, but most of the information is not available for many other states. Next slide. So by considering these gaps, and this study started in Karnataka, Karnataka stands in the 4th position in India in generating electricity using wind energy with an installed capacity of 5,000 megawatts. So next slide. So there are 14 districts in the state have existing windmills. Can you click? The animations are there. So one more click, ma'am. We selected 2 districts, Gadag and Chitradurga. And ma'am, one more click. Sorry, there are a lot of animations are there. So, ma'am, please, okay. So total 3 windmill sites and 3 control sites were selected for sampling. So 1 control site and 1 turbine site in the Gadag district, and 2 turbine sites and 2 control sites in the Chitradurga district. And next slide. So the habitats in the districts are mainly characterized by southern tropical dry deciduous forest and scrub jungle. The mountain areas in the districts are highly undulating. We selected turbine control sites. Those were very similar to the turbine sites, and these control sites were located about 1 kilometer away from the turbine sites. Move on to the next slide. To count the raptors, we used vantage point count method. For this, we established vantage point count stations in the highest peak in the mountain range in the both turbine and control sites. This elevated vantage point count stations provided good visibility over the surroundings. So therefore, we had no problem in counting birds. Raptor count was conducted fortnightly from 9 to 15 hours. Whenever the raptor was sighted, species and number of individuals, time spent in flight, and their distance from the nearest turbine location, all this information were recorded. Next slide. The flight position of the birds were broadly categorized into 2 types based on using turbine location as a reference point. The total turbine height in the study area is about 140 to 140 meter from the ground to the highest point of the rotating blade. So, ma'am, next slide. So, one more click, ma'am, and one more click. Again, one more click. The birds were seen flying within the rotor swept zone. We treated they were in the safe zone. If the birds were seen flying away from the swept zone, they were treated they were in the safe zone. Next one. From our observation, we recorded total 16 species of raptors. In that, 2 were endangered. They were Egyptian vulture and steppe eagle, and 6 were winter migrants, and 10 were resident species. Species like common kestrel and shikra and sharp-toed snake eagle were most frequently observed species in the study sites. Ma'am, next slide. The overall raptor abundance was higher in control site as compared to the turbine sites. Ma'am, next. So the overall raptor abundance in both control and turbine site vary. Few species like common kestrel and shikra, they were highly abundant in turbine site, whereas Bunilus eagle and Oriental honey buzzard, they were in highly abundant control site. There are 7 species shared both turbine and control site, but few species like white-eyed buzzard and black-winged recorded only in the turbine site. And next slide. The overall abundance of raptors were higher in safe zone compared to the risk zone. And next slide. And the flight activity of birds were higher in safe zone and compared to the risk zone. It is clearly indicating that the raptors were trying to avoid the close interaction with the turbines. But few species, common kestrel and shikra and shattered snake eagle, were seen flying very close to the turbine blades. But the overall flight activity was minimum as compared to the safe zone. And next slide. This species like common kestrel, white-eyed buzzard, shikra, and shortest snake eagle prefer turbine sites mainly because the infrastructure developed in the turbine sites used by this species as a artificial perch sites. Next one. From this observation, we made this following conclusions. This study was conducted in existing windmill sites. We have no data on raptors before establishing the wind farms, and this was one of the major limitations in the study. So, however, the control sites were selected very similar to the turbine sites, so the results are comparable. We have not observed any collision of raptors during the study area, but the lower raptor abundance in the turbine sites is clearly indicating that species, avoiding windmill sites. And it is important to note that collision considering collision is not only the one factor that will influence bird activity in the turbine site, but there are other disturbances like noise from the turbine and then continuous habitat modifications in the turbine area. All these disturbances will lead to species to move to less disturbed sites. So, so we have to consider all other disturbance also when we study impact of wind turbines on birds and other animals. So, long-term monitoring of raptors and their food resources like rodents and reptiles will help to understand the raptor abundance in both turbine and control site. So, in India, in near future, there are many turbine. Turbine going to be established, but it is essential to have a biodiversity assessment before establishment of wind turbines. This will actually give idea and what actual impact turbine can make on birds and other biodiversity. Ma'am, please next. From this, we would like to thank Karnataka Forest Department for the research permissions and funding, and Director Sakan for his help in various ways, and this conference organizing committee for selecting our abstract and giving the opportunity to present our work during this tough and technical situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Babu Rao. It's indeed,
thank you,
we are very happy to have you as the last presenter, and we are able to hear you from your country. All right, okay. We would like to open for any questions from the members in this room. Yeah, anyone would like to ask any question? All right. Yes. Anyone would like to speak? Okay. All right. It is indeed very interesting, yeah, for us to be able to see that, through the 8 presentations that actually presented today and shared with everyone in this room. Of course, we cannot run away that environmental, human activities has an impact on our raptor, yeah, in every aspect of whether it's ecological, biological, yeah, and so on and so forth. But what I think it's very interesting, yeah, through the sharings like what Babu has actually shared with us, it is, I think, somewhat similar with the experiences of other countries which are also doing, using turbines as one of the renewable energy, yeah, to generate renewable energy. Yeah, and this is something very interesting because when we see it being very similar with other countries, it creates opportunity and potential for us to actually collect data together and see how we can fill each other's gaps and move forward towards mitigation. Yeah.
Thank you for your positive comments.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And definitely, I also think with the other presenters as well, we may come from different countries, different parts of the world, but we face very similar issues. And this is the platform which actually allows us to see where are our limitations, what are our differences, and where we can actually work together, both it can be locally, regionally, as well as globally. And I think this is a session that actually provides that opportunity to everyone in this room and in this symposium, right? So with that, thank you very much, Rao, for sharing with us your conservation initiative of Raptor in India, and also to the rest of the presenters as well. And thank you to the members in this room for staying with us right to the end. It means very much with you having with us right to the end, although it is past our scheduled time, yeah. And with that, I end the session for concurrent session number 2 on environmental changes and threats. Okay.